Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. This is Ben Kinney, joined with Chad Himes and Bob Stewart. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about leadership.
We're going to sing first?
Oh, thank goodness. I can't think of any good leadership songs. So when I roped these knuckleheads into doing a podcast with me, I don't know if they knew that I was going to rope them into reading a ton of books, watching a ton of videos, researching, Chad learning how to count, Bob learning how to spell, me learning how to speak. It's been chaos ever since we started. And a while ago, we did an episode that we got a lot of great feedback on, and it was about the best books that we could think of about wealth or about money. And I'm a massive collector and consumer of knowledge and books, and I have a huge book collection. And I will tell you 90% of them suck. 10% of them are awesome. So today, Chad, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the best leadership books that we've ran across, some of which you're going to know, maybe you've heard of, and maybe even you've read one or two, and a couple, I'm just going to bet that you probably haven't.
Yeah, there's some even on this list I hadn't read yet until you threw these books at us and said, we're going to discuss these. And before we get into them, Ben, because I love our list, so Bob, stand by on our list sound effects stuff we're going to need over there. You referenced a past episode, and I want to let everybody find it really easily, and that was episode 49, where we talked about the 10 must-read books for money investing, real estate, and wealth. So if you're wondering what Ben was just talking about and you haven't checked those books out, go back and check out episode 49. And as you're taking your notes and listening to this episode, we'll share the list of these books with you at the end. We'll give you a link in the Facebook group, facebook.com/group/winmakegive, where you'll be able to get all these book titles and a link to them. So don't panic if you missed one of the titles. Bob, we're about to do an episode, and it's all about a list.
Uh-oh, here we go.
Where's our sound effect,
hold on.
Bob?
I don't know. But before we do that, though, because I don't want to just have a list episode, Ben, do me a favor. I'm fascinated by the way that you actually read books. And I don't even know that read is the right way to put it. Talk for a second about, because you haven't always been a massive consumer of books. I don't think in your entire life anyway, right? So just share with the audience a little bit. How do you read, I'm using air quotes, a book today?
Yeah, it's a good question.
He makes us read it and do all the research and tell them about the book, right? Isn't that the answer?
Yeah, right?
Right.
You know, growing up, I had a bad speech impediment. I would stutter a lot. And I was also a little bit dyslexic, and which that means it was hard for me to focus. I write and read letters out of order. If you ever see me writing a whiteboard, I'll write the third or fourth letter first and come back. And I'm also in some scale of ADD, which means when I read a paper book, I will get 4 or 5 pages through the book and realize that I've been thinking the entire time, and I have to go back and read the 4 or 5 pages. After doing that about 74 times, you get frustrated, right? Well, there's always audiobooks, and those are awesome. But I start listening to an audiobook, and I walk by the fridge. I'm like, oh, grapes, right? And then I start eating some grapes. I'm like, oh, these grapes are good, right? And then I'm like 4 more minutes into the book. I'm like, gotta go back.
At least you picked a healthy snack.
Of course,
everybody's a critic. Everybody's a critic. So what I started doing is I break my reading up into small chunks, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 to 3 times a day. When possible, I have a paper copy of the book, Bob, that I hold in my hand, and I listen to it on Audible. It's more expensive because you got to buy it twice. Nice thing with the paper book, you have something to give away to somebody when you're done. But it allows me to hear it, see it, and I even kind of read it out loud and say it. So my retention is like 10 times better than it's ever been. The other thing is I speed it up on Audible. And when you speed it up on Audible and you're holding the book at the same time, it forces you to go so fast line by line, you can't daydream. It gets you focused. And you can't spend all day doing that, right? But you can spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And if you do that at 2 times speed, you just read 30 minutes instead of 15, you can get through a lot of books. So I'm glad you asked that. Chad, thank you for giving all the preemptive information. Chad's like having a parent right before a field trip. He makes sure that all your little permission slip is signed and that you got your snacks.
And I am not the rule follower, but somebody of the three of us has to.
And one of these books actually will talk about the rule follower or the people that play in the gray lines. Is that what you think you are? You're the captain class? You
Not
play
talking
in the
about
gray
anything.
lines?
Not talking about anything yet. We're not there yet. Bob, give us the sound effect. We got a list coming. All right, Ben, how many books are on this list?
This is a list of 5 books, but I'm going to share 6.
Because you're Ben Kinney and you do that stuff.
Well, because I can't count. Well, once I get past my five fingers, right, it's a little bit more
The
difficult.
other hand is holding this book right now.
Bob, do you know who Andrew Grove is?
Yeah. So he was the third employee at Intel and would become their third CEO. And really is the guy kind of credited in Silicon Valley for the explosion of the semiconductor industry, or he was a pioneer of the semiconductor industry, microchips.
There's a lot of books out there, especially about management and leadership. And I found that there's really 2 types of books. There's books written by leaders who lead stuff, and there's books written by people who want to write about leadership stuff. And Andrew led one of the biggest technology companies in the world, right? And he wrote a book called High Output Management. The foreword was written by Ben Horowitz, which will mean something to you guys in a little bit, because Bob's going to tell you a little bit of history about who Ben actually is. But I want to read you a part of High Output Management. So this is the foreword. So it's not actually Andrew writing it, but it's a conversation between somebody and Andrew. And it says, many years after reading High Output Management, I met Andy for the first time. Upon seeing him, I was so excited that I immediately blurted out how much I loved the book. In classic Andy Grove style, he shot back, "Why?" I did not expect that. I thought that he would say thank you, or I appreciate that, but not why. But that was Andy. He was always teaching and always expecting more from every student. Caught completely off guard, I scrambled for the reason and came across a good one. I said to Andy, every other management book that I've read explains the trivial, but yours gets to real answers. Upon hearing that, the master teacher, Andy, of course, softened and replied with this priceless story. It's funny you say that about management books. I recently ran out of space on my bookshelf at home, so I was faced with a choice. Either I had to throw away some books or buy a bigger house. Well, that was an easy decision, but which books to throw out? Then I thought, the management books, but I had a problem. Nearly every management book that I had received was sent to me by the author and was autographed with a kind inscription. I felt badly about throwing away all those nice notes, so I went through each book and tore out the inscription page and threw away the book. So now I have a large stack of pages of nice notes sent to me and plenty of space for the good books. Ladies and gentlemen, High Output Management is a good book because Andrew was a good leader.
It's amazing. We could probably do a whole class just on him and his leadership style. Everybody makes a big deal about when the CEO moves into like a cubicle with it. Andy did that. That's how he actually was. He was always he wasn't in a big office like that. He got rid of the, reserved parking spaces. That was a thing back when he was doing all of this business, Ben. And he was a leader before a lot of the things that are now cool for leaders to do and say, hey, I'm in the trenches with the community. So he could probably be a whole episode on his own. So we might have to save him and come back to that book as its own. Yet that's our bonus book for you. Now we're going to keep going and move along because I see you moving through that stack over there.
The next author that I want to talk about is a great guy. I've emailed him. He communicates. He wrote a handful of great books, but one of my favorites that he ever wrote, the author is Joe Calloway. He wrote a book, a very short, easy to read, probably a 2-hour book called Work Like You're Showing Off. The joy, jazz, and kick of being better tomorrow than you were today. And just like in kindergarten, let me read you a few of his words. Showing off has been variously defined as pretentious, exaggeration, posturing, bragging, inflated self-importance, arrogance, big-headedness, pride, conceit, being full of yourself, being vain, or overweening. My goodness, who in their right mind would want to be thought as any of those? The shame and the horror. Those definitions are misguided interpretations of what is, in fact, the most noble of pursuits. Showing off is completely misunderstood and has gotten a very bad rap. What the world needs is not less showing off, but more. If you're not showing off, then what's the point? If you're not showing off, then why even show up? Why go to work? Why play the game? Showing off, as I define it, is a good thing. Showing off is about bringing the best you have to any situation. It's about excelling, Chad. It's about exceeding expectations, Bob. It's about experiencing the joy, jazz, and kick of being better tomorrow than you were today. When presented with a problem or a challenge, showing off is an attitude that says, watch this.
What that immediately makes me think is you always, and we've talked about this on this podcast before, like, what would your spouse, you always have who are those two most important people in your life, right? And then if they showed up with you at work and they sat over your shoulder all day, would they be impressed or depressed by the output or the work that you did that day? And this is essentially that concept, right? This idea that you're showing up and showing off, just giving your best effort, when somebody's looking or when they're not.
Living up to your potential, so to speak. One more message here. Much further in the book, Joe says, maybe your life has worked pretty well to this point. You've made a go of it with your career and things are rolling along pretty well, but you want more. You want to take your job or your business or some other aspect of your life to the next level, but you just can't seem to get any upward momentum. Here's your obstacle. If you are successful, then you know what used to work. The key word is used to work. Past tense, gone, over and done with, obsolete, outdated, useless, in the way. Past success is probably the most challenging obstacle to your ability to move through your life to the next level. You have to succeed by doing things in a certain way. Why should you possibly let go of what has worked for you up until now? Because past success can be, and usually is, the enemy, ladies and gentlemen, of future success.
My favorite lesson from this one, and I think I probably just think it's my favorite lesson because of the way he says it, and it's grand stupidity and absurd bravery. I mean, it's just such a great message, and we've all heard it before, and we've heard it different ways, right? It's that you want to do something, right? And the examples he gives is you want to write a book. So many people have said, I want to write a book. You want to run a marathon. You want to move somewhere drastic. You want to start a new business, whatever it is. And we don't do anything about it because we know what other people will say. Right. And you need to have that grand stupidity and that absurd bravery to be able to follow through and work like you're showing off. And Ben, on page 92 is where I highlighted, he's got a quote. He says, the problem is never how to get new, innovative thoughts into your mind, but how to get the old ones out. And those are the two big takeaways from this one for me.
Joe said, everyone improvises as they go along. Stop doubting yourself and just take your best shot. To learn and progress, you have to be willing to make mistakes. Don't waste time deliberating. Take action towards achieving your goal. If you're looking for a short flight read where you want to push yourself as a leader and live up to your potential, the number one book on our list today, Work Like You're Showing Off by Joe Calloway. The next book we're going to talk about, one of my all-time favorites, and it's probably a book that maybe you wouldn't normally pick up just because of who the guy is that wrote it. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And the subtitle is Building a Business When There Are No Easy Answers. And it's written by Ben Horowitz. Who's Ben, Bob?
I wonder how, because I'd heard his name before, and I recognize his name from a blog that he kept for many years, and maybe still does today, about just like real life leadership experience. But originally, he was the guy that kind of came up in the 90s in the internet era and held a bunch of different jobs at Netscape as a product manager, and he would co-found a company with Mark Andreessen, a name that many of you guys would know, but he co-founded a company called LoudCloud that would ultimately sell for, well, they sold one portion of the company for $60 million and later would sell a spinoff of the company to Hewlett Packard for $1.6 billion. They now have...
Did you just say billion?
Yeah,
Billion,
1.6
like
billion.
B,
Wow.
B for
In
Ben.
cash back in 2007, which wasn't, which was uncommon back then, right? They now today have Andreessen Horowitz, which is a venture capital fund, and they invest in Silicon Valley in some of these big, huge, wins and successful companies that you guys have all heard of. So that's kind of who this guy is. But what he did in the book is he really brought to life the experience of him actually running his company and not just like the answers you tend to hear in leadership, but actually getting into like the details of how to make hard decisions. Things like, firing a buddy, right? Firing somebody at work that like you actually liked personally, right? Or just some of these things that you run across in business that there's not easy answers for, and a lot of people don't talk about, right? The actual like practical application of being in your business and running it day to day.
Yeah, like the tough things that they don't teach you in business school and you don't really learn or even think about until you're put in that position. Like, what happens if you have to lay somebody off? Or you have to fire an executive or replace a CEO or demoting a friend, recruiting somebody from one of your friends' companies, how to create a culture in your company, how to minimize politics, the skills that a CEO needs. Answering the tough questions is what the Hard Things About Hard Things books does. And it's one of the books that I pick up time and time again, and I revisit and I reread, and I highly recommend.
There's a concept that he talked about in there that was something that they kind of put in place at their company, which is to basically ask the question, what am I not doing? So like, as an individual in this role, what am I not doing? As a company, and we're servicing our clients, what are we not doing? And it became a theme throughout this big business that they built, that they would ask this question over and over and over again to kind of refine and make sure they were in tune with their customers, with their employees, and we're building a good culture by figuring out what are we not doing that we could be.
Yeah, I got some quotes from this one. You guys have given great summary to it. Ben says in the book, not our Ben Horowitz here, says, perhaps the most important thing I learned as an entrepreneur was to focus on what I needed to get right and stop worrying about all the things I did wrong or might do wrong. And boy, don't we spend all our time there. And then to everybody out there, please listen to this one that came from the book for me. You've heard something like this before. There are no silver bullets that are going to fix that. No, we're going to have to use a lot of lead bullets. Yeah. Right? Everyone's always looking for that silver bullet, that magic solution that's out there. No, get yourself an automatic weapon and hold that trigger and just keep firing. You'll hit the target. It'll work.
It's about hard work and grinding through.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right, Ben, we've gone through 3 books there. As you keep going through your list, you got the next one in your hand. What is the next book on our top leadership books?
Probably the one that you guys have heard of or read or had or own or whatever the case may be.
And it's the one I refer everybody to when they're starting about leadership from this author.
Yeah. This author says, my belief that everything rises and falls on leadership solidified in 1976, and it set me on a leadership journey that I'm still traveling to this day. I began the journey by asking questions. How do you define leadership? What is a leader? How does leadership work? Unfortunately, people's usual answers to those questions are not very helpful. Some people identify leadership with obtaining a leadership position, but I've known bad leaders who had good positions and good leaders who had no position at all. Haven't you? Other people say of leadership, I can't describe it, but I know it when I see it. Well, that may be true. It doesn't help anyone learn how to lead. The conclusion I came to early on is that leadership is simply influence. Who am I talking about, Chad?
It's John Maxwell.
John Maxwell. Written more more leadership books than anybody. He has 4,700 different laws about leadership.
That's right.
But each book is good.
Yes.
But if I had to pick one of them, and it wasn't the 21 irrefutable
my
laws of
other one,
leadership, it'd be the 5 levels of leadership.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Let's lay out those 5 levels of leadership for everybody, because we know half the reason they're listening to the podcast is they know we've done the research and they don't have to read the book.
What's the base? He puts it in a triangle, which means I like him
You
already
love it.
because I put everything in triangles or pie shapes. At the base of the triangle,
Position. Right.
That means people are leaders because they have the job title.
Yep.
They got the business card, right? They own the company, but it doesn't mean they're real leaders.
Not at all. No.
What's the next one?
Level 2 is permission leadership. So now we've got a relationship being formed. Now I'm allowing you to lead me. I'm wanting you to lead me. We have that relationship that I'm willing to follow you.
And you have to progress through the levels of leadership if you want to get to become that better leader, to take your organization to the highest level. And if you're successful in progressing up another level, you'd end up at level 3, which is
production, right? And that's what have you actually done? So I don't care if you're the greatest leader in the world. If you're standing in the back at the army and just saying charge, I'm probably not charging. Let me know that you were a great warrior that now has earned the right to lead me. Let me know you were a great salesperson that I want to follow.
because you have credibility because you've done the job.
Yes.
You've made the calls, you've sold the things, you've dealt with the customers, you've built the box, you've done all the things, right?
Yep.
Because of that, you have production level leadership, you have credibility. Now, the goal is we want to continue to move up, and level 4 would be what?
It's people development.
You're not only becoming a leader, Chad, you're turning other people into leaders.
Right. And this is the one, it's perfect timing. I sent a message to somebody who I wanted to get on for an interview for a podcast. And I asked them, I said, look, I want to have you on this podcast because of your relationship with a certain leader. And they said, that leader has changed my life. And there's so many lessons that are coming out today that I didn't even remember him teaching me years ago. And that's that personal development, people development that leader is doing for other people, which is truly moving up and putting them in that position of a true leadership.
Well, if you work at an organization, Bob, and you want to grow your leadership and you're thinking about maybe switching companies, right? And the goal is to grow your leadership. One of the first questions you'd ask that other company, that leader of that company is, how many leaders have you grown here? Show me somebody else that started where you're at that's turned into something you want to be. And if they don't have that, right, they might just be a boss.
Yep.
And not a level 4 leader.
No, that's a level 1 leader, the boss.
Yeah. Level 5, Chad.
It's the pinnacle, right? It's the pinnacle of the triangle. It's the top. And it's the respect that comes with it, right? And people follow you because of who you are and what you stand for.
Can you guys think of other people we've discussed in this podcast that are really level 5 leaders?
John Wooden.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And isn't it interesting? He's got a pyramid also, which is probably why Ben likes him too.
Anybody else come to mind?
Well, everybody that's there that we've talked to and had the pleasure of talking to are leaders. I mean, I'm going to go back to an episode with Joe DeSena, the CEO from Spartan, and there are people who will go out and run literally through walls for Joe because he has that respect and what he stands for as a leader as well.
Yeah, we're looking for leaders who create leaders and grow leaders and retain leaders.
And actually are true to themselves as a leader so that they're not just some leader by title or a leader of, hey, Ben, you did a great job helping me become better, yet you're full of crap, sort of thing. I want a leader who I have respect for as well and what they stand for.
Can you guys think of another individual that we spoke a lot about who was known for making large reductions in his workforce?
Well, that's going to be Jack Welch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He was a leader of leaders. In fact, he created an institute in his company for training leadership.
Correct. And people knew what he stood for, and they respected him for it. Some people might not have, yet overall they respected him for it, which is that pinnacle leadership
Horowitz respected him, I'm assuming, right? The hard thing about hard things, like Welch came in there and made a lot of hard decisions.
Sure did.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to go to another book, and it's one of my all-time favorites about leadership, and it really blew me away when I read it. And it may not be one that you're aware of, but I truly highly recommend that you take the time to read this particular book. And before I tell you what it is. I'm just going to read you, just like in your kindergarten class, a little bit from this book. As I type this sentence, I've been working on the same line of inquiry for almost 11 years. I've reviewed and researched the accomplishments of more than 1,200 teams across the world in 37 major categories of sport since 1880. 1880. I've ripped through hundreds of books, articles, documentaries, scientific papers. I've tracked down interview subjects in Auckland, one of my favorite places, Barcelona, Boston, Chicago, Havana, London, Los Angeles, Madrid, Melbourne, Montreal, Moscow, New York, Paris, Perth, Rio de Janeiro, and dozens of sleepy hamlets in between. When I started out, I never expected to reach one conclusion. I assumed the fingerprints of these elite units would have many of the same whorls and ridges, yet no perfected match. In the end, I was shocked to discover that the world's most extraordinary sports teams didn't have many propulsive traits in common. They had exactly one, and it was something I hadn't anticipated. The captain class is a culmination of a lifetime of watching sports, 2 decades of spending time in orbit of world-class teams, and my own lengthy investigation into what drives the dynamics behind a surpassing collective effort. It's not the story of one team's triumph, although there are many triumphs recounted here. It's not a biography of one star coach, although many legendary figures will be discussed. Though it uses sports as a source material, it's ultimately a book about a single idea, one that is simple, powerful, and can be applied to teams in many other fields, from business to politics, scientific, and arts. It's a notion that the most crucial ingredient in a team that achieves and sustains historic greatness is the character of the player who leads it. This book is called The Captain's Class. It's written by Sam Walker, and the subline is a new theory of leadership. Now, Sam Walker spent most of his career, Bob.
So Sam was the Wall Street Journal deputy editor for the Enterprise, the unit that directs the paper's in-depth one-page features, investigative reporting. This guy, but he spent a career being a reporter, a sports columnist, a sports editor. And so this book is a look at what the 16 greatest kind of teams in the history of sports, going, the 80 Olympics hockey team and the 60s Boston Celtics. And he looks at all these different teams over the course of, 150 years, basically. And he pulls out of there this idea that there's a captain, somebody that led these teams, and it wasn't always the best player, right? It wasn't always that superstar that got the headlines. What it was this kind of gritty, go to work. In sports, they call that guy the lunchbox guy, the lunch pail guy, right? The guy, the blue collar guy that comes in all the time and really is that cohesive unit, or that cohesion that pulls the team together. And there's some certain characteristics that person has, things like dogged work ethic and a willingness to play in the gray lines of the rules. And he found that these people didn't necessarily have these traits off the field, off the court, but when they came to the court, they brought this certain sense of lunch pail, right? Of like coming in with that hard work. And every single one of these teams had this guy. And it wasn't always the superstar.
They were looking, what Sam, this isn't a book about Sam who wants to write about leadership. This is a book where Sam says, I've spent my whole lifetime studying sports. And not just any team, but I've studied the winningest teams in all history, right? From rugby to soccer to volleyball, in the Olympics or in professional baseball or basketball or football, what made it? And so many of us would probably jump on and say, it's got to be the coach. But it wasn't the coach. Well, the other obvious thing is it was the star player. It was the Michael Jordan. Yep. It wasn't the star player.
Right.
It wasn't those. What he came to find out was And many times it was the team captain. It was the person that kept everybody together, that held them together. And those captains exhibited certain traits, Bob, that you started to address. Things like the willingness to carry the other players' bags.
Well, here's the thing, Ben. I mean, a lot of people have seen the movie Miracle, or maybe at least know the story of the Miracle on Ice team, the 1980 USA Olympic team. And Mike Eruzione was the captain of the team, yet he wasn't the best player on the team. Not at all. Yet he was the heart of the team. You know, one of the quotes from the book here that Sam shares is he says, group of individuals who were unremarkable alone, but together, potent, magical.
Yeah. They didn't necessarily want the spotlight.
Right.
And many times they avoided it.
Right.
They didn't want to do the interviews. They let somebody else on the team do that. They weren't the leader in the traditional sense. They weren't the loudest and most obnoxious. Many times they didn't yell at all. All they did was give a player a look.
Yeah.
And that look was, I got it, right? It was the person that was leading that really nobody thought of. But it was that person that created wins year after year and season after season.
Quote, the most crucial ingredient in a team that achieves and sustains historic greatness is the character of the player who leads it. Close quote.
I'll give you really quick the 7 traits, by the way, because I think they're like they don't need much explanation. Extreme doggedness and focus in competition, aggressive play that tests the limits of the rules, a willingness to do thankless jobs in the shadows, a low-key, practical, and democratic communication style, motivates others with passionate, non-verbal displays, strong convictions and the courage to stand apart, and an ironclad emotional control. These guys Tim Duncan never lost his cool. You never saw that guy one time, even when they lost in a buzzer beater, right? And all of these captains from these different 16 teams displayed those same 7 characteristics.
This has just become my favorite leadership book of all time, and I'm going to tell you why right here and right now. One, it's got you reading a book, Ben, sports related.
That is a win.
And Bob, you just gave us a list from the book. I mean, this has just become my favorite leadership book of all time.
Yeah, you know, this book shook me because in the world of dodgeball, these leaders would not be chosen. You know, most people probably wouldn't draft us.
Yeah.
If we were looking at us on a lineup, they would pick the guy or gal that was pretty and tall and skinny and well organized and dressed good and used the big worders, you know, and was a little bit charming and had the charisma and was outgoing. But I know 1,000 of those people, and they don't lead anything other than themselves well. Sometimes it's these other people, and they're getting missed by you as you're building your company. You're missing the person in your organization that has the ability to take it to new heights because you're looking for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. And if you know the movie, you got the reference. All right, Ben, keep us going. What's the last book on the list?
You know, I say this individual's name often because I respect him. I mean, I respect all of these people. I've had conversations with Joe Calloway. I've invited Sam Walker out to our area to speak to people. This next individual, I had him speak at our annual company event because I trust what he has to say so much. This person said, most organizations that stay the same get left behind, particularly those that refuse to reinvent themselves on the other side of a recession. To move forward, change is required. Finding a way to help employees through the change is a key to building consensus toward the vision. This individual wrote a book called Engaged Leadership, and we've interviewed him on our podcast already, Mr. Clint Swindoll. I highly recommend Engaged Leadership. The subline is building a culture to overcome employee disengagement. Chad, tell us a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm going to do my field trip report too before this and tell everybody that we did have the opportunity for you and Clint to sit down in an interview. It's back in episode 21. Now, it's not about the book, so you'll get other amazing information that the two of you talked about. Yet in this book, I like it very much because I'm a big fan of fables. I just think they're a great way to learn. And Clint writes this book. It's a fable for the first 2/3 of the book. And then the last third of the book, he actually gives you like the practical application for those people who don't like the business fables as they power through it. And the two main things that come from this book for me are, one of the things Clint talks about, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, is what he calls the engagement challenge in an organization. And you're going to have, and it's somewhere around 20% of
26% was the top side.
Thank you. Yeah. Of people who are called oh yeahs, right? Those are the people that you know are going to run through that wall for you.
How does Clint say it? Oh yeah.
Exactly, right? Then you've got the people, Bob, help me with the number. It's about 50%, right? In the middle group there. And that's those people who are just called okays.
Okay.
Right, exactly. And then you've got, Bob, whatever the math is, finish it up for me.
Yeah.
All right, 24% are actively disengaged, or we call those the oh no's.
How does Clint say it? Oh no.
I love how he does it though, because he's like, you show up to them and you're like, hey, this is what we're gonna do today. And they're like, oh yeah, let's do it, right? Or okay. Or, oh no. And you guys all, if you lead people, you could look around right now and probably figure out who's your oh yeah, who's your okay, and who's your oh no, right?
Well, there's four of us in the room. So what that means is one of us right now is the okay, the oh yeah, two are the okays, and one's the oh no. And I got to figure it's Dave over there is the oh no, because we're still talking.
Yeah,
right? He's like, oh no,
Dave
they're going
is definitely
on still, right?
Oh no.
He's got to clean up our messes.
No, we have to do another one of these.
Yeah. So
Right?
so Clint talks about that and making sure you know, and you lean into those oh yeahs as the people who are going to bring your organization along. You know, Bob, you always had a title. Evangelist was your title at a past company because you were that oh yeah. You were that guy who brought that. The other thing Clint talks about is the engaged leadership model, which he breaks down to 4 pieces, and I won't get into them in detail. There's the organizational model, there's the directional leadership piece of the model, and there's the motivational piece of the model. But it's the 4th piece that matters the most, in my opinion, Ben, and that's that middle piece of the puzzle. And if you looked at the image, you'd like it because it's a triangle. Yet the middle piece of the puzzle is that character core. And I think it's interesting that the last 3 books we mentioned, those were all things that were pieces of that leadership. Yeah. Right. Clint's talking the character core. You just talked about it's the character of the captain. We just talked about level 5 leadership in John's book talks about having that character that people respect within you.
So let's re-summarize the 6 books that make up our 5-book list. Ladies and gentlemen, High Output Management by Andrew Grove, remember, CEO of Intel. Work Like You're Showing Off by our friend Joe Calloway. Highly, highly recommend it. The business legend Ben Horowitz, who wrote The Hard Thing About Hard Things. The book that should be on everybody's shelf, The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. And then Captain's Class by Sam Walker. A New Theory of Leadership. Finally, our friend Clint Swindoll, who wrote the business book and fable, Engaged Leadership. We hope that you check him out, you read him, you let us know if you like them. Jump into our Facebook group, Chad, which is
Facebook.com/group/win-make-give.
Let us know if you've read them, what you think of them. Give us some ideas and subjects and things you want to talk about in the future. We'd love to see you. Give us a review, give us a rating, join our community. We really appreciate everything that you guys have all and gals have all done with us and for us over the year.
And stay engaged with us as well as you stay engaged as a leader. And remember to subscribe. Make sure you're getting the podcast sent to you as we keep dropping new episodes. Until the next one, remember, wash those hands. And as always, do good.